a three-masted wooden schooner named the Amelia J, under the command of Captain L.G. Atwell, aged 35, left Newcastle on the 21st of August 1920, sailing south to Hobart in Tasmania, with a cargo of 600 tons of coal. She was a new ship, built in Hobart and launched in August 1919, with her first voyage made in October of that year. The captain and 11 crew were aboard. R.J. Maxwell was the mate, and D.J. MacDonald the second mate. Able seamen R.E. Noonan, A. Cooler, Henrik Hansen, T. Scottnery, and J. McLennan. There were 2 ordinary seamen, Herbert Orford Walpole, aged 17, whose brother had been on the voyage from Hobart but who had left the ship in Newcastle, and 16-year-old J. Lee Archer. The cook was P.J. Elliott, and J.B. Emery was the cabin boy. By the 11th of September, with the vessel overdue, the first concerns were raised that the little ship might have been blown off course out into the Tasman Sea by a succession of strong southerly gales. Shipping was asked to keep a watch for the Amelia J, and if nothing had been heard, the ship's agents intended to alert authorities. Although nothing had been heard from the ship since it was seen 80 miles south of Sydney, there were no fears that the ship and crew were in any danger, merely delayed. A ship seen off Gaybo Island, Victoria, later was possibly the Amelia J, but this is uncertain. By the 14th of September, with the ship having been at sea for 24 days, concern mounted with officials alerted to the situation. A voyage down the east coast of Australia would normally take between 5 and 15 days. The weather had been rough at times, which added to the unease felt. Some ships had been known to take 6 weeks to battle against headwinds to complete the journey. However, those ships had invariably been sighted by others, and signals passed between them. There was nothing reported for the Amelia J. Shipping companies, naval units and lighthouse keepers were informed and on the lookout for any sign of the missing ship. The Amelia J was not fitted with a wireless radio, and the mystery of its whereabouts prompted calls for the Australian government to make radios compulsory on all ships over a certain size. A steamer called the Musgrave conducted a systematic search along the bays of the east coast of Tasmania and Flinders Island, without finding any trace of the missing ship. A request was made on the 18th of September for a naval vessel to join the search. Incredibly, the Minister of the Navy, William Henry Laird Smith, declared that there were no ships available to help. The rebuttal caused resentment in Tasmania, and the state's Premier sent a telegram to the Prime Minister to ask that all possible assistance be given. Around the 21st of September, a Mr. A.A. Tibbs suggested that an aeroplane be used to search. There was at that time no aeroplane in Tasmania, but it was hoped that aviators on the mainland would take to the skies to help. The ship's owners offered a £1,000 reward to the first flyer to locate the ship. Now a month out of port, it was feared that the rudder had been broken in a storm, and the ship was drifting aimlessly somewhere in the open ocean. The Amelia J had been through heavy seas in May with no problems. The schooner was well provisioned with food, and water supplies could be replenished from rain, using tarpaulins, if the crew were still aboard. At midday on the 23rd of September 1920, Major William Anderson, accompanied by a mechanic, Sergeant Chester, flew out from Point Cook Air Base in Melbourne in an Air Force de Havilland 9A to commence searching for the Amelia J. Captain William Stutt, aged 31, and Sergeant Abner Dalzell, 33, flew in a second identical plane. Their flight paths took them over the Victorian coast as far as Wilson's Promontory, searching for ships or wreckage. The course was designed that the planes would be within sight of land at all times. Then they flew out over the strait to Flinders Island, where they checked 3 vessels, but none were the quarry they sought. Their journey then took them over Cape Barren Island, which had already been heavily scrutinised from the water. Continuing on to Tasmania, somewhere near the north-east coast, at 12,000 feet, Major Anderson lost visual contact with Stutt, when Stutt flew behind some dense cloud, while Anderson checked some wreckage in a bay. 5 minutes later, Anderson was back on course, but Stutt's plane was nowhere to be seen. A man named Ross, who saw the 2 planes fly over Van Sittart Island, thought that the engine of one of the planes was misfiring badly. It was assumed this was Stutt's plane, but Anderson had had some trouble starting his machine on takeoff in Victoria, so that may not necessarily have been so. Anderson scanned the coast from Cape Portland down to the Eddystone Lighthouse, before flying out to sea some miles. Finally he turned inland, having not sighted anything relevant, and landed near Hobart at about 5 p.m. News came through that wreckage, including part of the side of a ship, had been found on King Island in Bass Strait, causing belief that the mystery surrounding the Amelia J had been dispelled. The wreckage contained several benzene tins, which identified it as the Southern Cross, a barkentine which had left Melbourne for Hobart and not yet arrived. It was conjectured that the ship had gotten into difficulty during a storm, and that something, possibly a distress flare, had ignited its volatile cargo and blown the ship apart. The loss of the Southern Cross revived memories of another ship which had vanished in 1918 while sailing from Sydney to Melbourne. The Handa Isle was also carrying benzene, and although the suggestion was dismissed by the Navy, there was a belief the ship might have hit a sea mine. With this second incident, and the Amelia J still missing, the Australian government was forced into action, sending HMAS Platypus, a submarine depot ship, to investigate a strange report from Flinders Island. A coloured light, described as weird-looking, had been seen out to sea. The light remained on for some time before suddenly disappearing. The light, seen from various places on the island, was described as like a large star, changing colour from white to red to blue. 2 aeroplanes searched the New South Wales coast, and the SS Melbourne with a seaplane aboard was provisioned to join the effort to find the Amelia J. Expectation was that the mystery would be resolved one way or the other very shortly. With no word received yet from Captain Stutt, Major Anderson left Hobart to retrace his flight back to Victoria. HMAS Platypus and Tasmanian police had been notified to keep watch for Stutt, who it was assumed had landed in wild country, and as his plane was not equipped with a radio, was unable to communicate his position. Major Anderson spent 4.5 hours searching for his missing comrade on the 27th of September, flying over Cape Barren Island without result. People on Swan Island, off the coast of Tasmania, said they had not seen any planes fly over them. Anderson then searched in the Cape Portland area, but again found nothing. It was determined that the cloud was not obscuring mountains on Cape Barren Island, so it was discounted that Stutt had flown into them. If the plane had fallen into the sea, it was thought it would have only floated for about 2 hours. Fishermen reported that oil was covering the west head of Flinders Island for 1/4 mile, but this was thought to have come from the Southern Cross. The search for the Amelia J and Captain Stutt continued through September and into October. The naval destroyer HMAS Swordsman was brought in to help, but still not a trace of the schooner or the biplane could be located. More unidentified lights were seen from St Helens Point on the northeast coast of Tasmania on the nights of the 28th, 29th and 30th of September. It was thought there could be very lights being sent up by Captain Stutt, but searches revealed no sign of Stutt and Dalzell. Stutt was known to have a pistol and 6 lights with him when he left Point Cook. Lights were again reported on the night of the 1st of October in Gould's Country, Tasmania. These were later discounted as being Stutt's, as more than 6 lights were seen. Major Anderson spent over 6 hours flying over this area searching for the missing aviators, which was believed to be the Australian record for time spent continuously in the air at that time. On the ground, hundreds of locals from the towns, farms and mines traversed the area on foot, on horseback and in cars. On the 10th of October 1920, the search was abandoned as futile. The Amelia J was lost with all hands. No survivors of the Southern Cross were found, and Captain Stutt, Sergeant Dalzell and the de Havilland had vanished without trace. At the end of October, an inquiry into the loss of the de Havilland was held. Captain Stutt had been one of the most experienced and competent pilots in Australia. He had made 5,000 flights and had never crashed. Prior to the First World War, he had been a test pilot in England. A lone miner who lived in a hut near Gladstone, Tasmania, reported hearing something fall from the sky, followed by an explosion on the day Stutt went missing. A search found nothing at the time, but by the start of November rumours circulated that 2 bodies and remains of a plane had been found at White Rock. These rumours proved to be false. Another report said a ball of fire had been seen to fall from the sky into the sea, giving rise to a theory that the plane's extra fuel tanks had somehow caught fire and exploded in the sky. The inquiry ended in early November, merely suggesting the search was arranged too hurriedly and the maintenance undertaken on the planes may not have been thorough enough. In other words, they had no idea what fate had befallen the de Havilland and the 2 missing men. The owners of the Amelia J continued to plead for naval assistance in a renewed search, but in vain. In 1923, the mother of Herbert Walpole was paid £100 compensation by the shipping company for the loss of her son. For a few years after, any discovery was likely to be declared the ship or the aviators. In June 1921, the mystery was revived when a message written in red pencil on paper was discovered in a bottle near Melbourne. The message, which read, "Amelia J, off Tasmanian coast on fire, love from Jack," and then some further words which were illegible, was considered a hoax. The same month, a quantity of coal washed up on the shore of Flinders Island. Speculation that it came from the cargo of the Amelia J could not be proven either way. Some cabin fittings, a cook's wooden chopping board, and other jetsam washed up at about the same time. The charred keel of a ship was found washed up in Gippsland in February 1922, and immediately it too was assumed to be part of the Amelia J. 2 human skeletons found on the beach in February 1924 near Cape Portland were again immediately assumed to be the missing aviators by the popular press. A month later it was determined that it was a single skeleton and was that of an adult Aboriginal woman. Today, Stutt Street and Dalzell Road intersect on the Point Cook RAAF base. Taken individually, each part of the events in September 1920 in the Bass Strait are not extraordinary. A ship explodes which was carrying a volatile cargo. Another ship goes down in stormy seas. A plane gets into trouble in ditches. What has caused questions in the past is the context. The wreckage from the Southern Cross was readily found and identified by searchers. No trace of the Amelia J or the crew were ever located, unless the coal was from the ship. The plane, if it did so in a few minutes when it was unobserved, and either on land or in sight of land, but without leaving a trace to be discovered. Nothing was found of whatever was said to have crashed and exploded near the miner's hut. And what of the strange lights seen night after night in the dark maritime skies? What were they, and what, if anything, did they have to do with those who vanished in the Bass Strait and were consigned to the dark corners of history?